Have you ever held on to something so tightly, only to watch it slip away right before your eyes? Lila had. She had always believed love was enough to fix anything, that promises made under the stars couldn't break. But everything changed the day she found the letter. It was just an ordinary piece of paper, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 heartbreaks. It was a quiet morning when Lila noticed it on her desk, neatly folded and placed where she couldn't miss it. Her chest tightened as she recognized his handwriting. For a moment she hesitated, afraid of what she'd find inside. Her mind raced with questions. What could he possibly have to say that he couldn't tell her in person? As she opened it, the world seemed to slow. The words hit her like a tidal wave. He was leaving. He didn't think he could give her the love she deserved, and walking away was the only choice he could make. The letter was short, almost cold in its simplicity, but the pain it delivered was anything but. Lila sat there frozen, clutching the letter like it might dissolve if she let go. Memories of their time together flooded her mind. The laughter, the quiet moments, the promises they made. None of it made sense now. How could someone who claimed to love her so deeply leave without even saying goodbye? But something about the letter didn't feel right. It wasn't just the words, it was what wasn't said. A knot formed in her stomach as she read it again, searching for answers between the lines. And that's when she noticed it, the faint smudge in the corner, as if a tear had fallen there. But whose? Lila stared at the smudge for what felt like an eternity. Her mind spiraled with possibilities. Had he cried while writing it? Was there regret hidden behind the careful phrasing of his words? Or was it her own tear, unknowingly shed while reading? The more she thought about it, the less clear it became. They weren't perfect, but who was? Sure, they had their fights, late-night arguments that ended in quiet apologies and promises to do better. She thought they were just like any other couple, working through the ups and downs. But now, every moment they'd shared seemed like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit anymore. Lila thought back to the days leading up to the letter. He had been distant, quieter than usual. He smiled less, talked less, and avoided her eyes when she asked him what was wrong. She remembered the last time they were together, sitting by the river where they used to laugh for hours. That day he seemed distracted, like he was somewhere else entirely. She picked up her phone, her fingers hovering over his name and her contacts. The urge to call him, to demand answers, was overwhelming. But what would she say? If he truly wanted to leave, no words could make him stay. And yet, a part of her wasn't convinced. Something didn't add up. Her thoughts wandered to the letter again. Why had he chosen to write it? He wasn't the type to avoid confrontation. He was always the one to face things head-on, no matter how hard. This wasn't like him. A sinking feeling settled in her chest, a quiet voice in the back of her mind, whispering that there was more to this story than what the letter revealed. Lila couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. The letter felt like a wall between them, but it also felt incomplete, like a story with missing pages. That night she sat in her room, staring at their old photos scattered across the floor. Each one told a story, a trip to the mountains, a late-night coffee run, the way he looked at her when he thought no one else could see. How could all of that just disappear? She decided to reach out to Sarah, his best friend, hoping for clarity. Sarah sounded hesitant when she answered the phone, her voice strained as if she knew this call was coming. When Lila asked if he'd said anything about leaving, there was a long pause on the other end. "He didn't tell me much," Sarah finally said, her tone guarded. "But he wasn't himself these last few weeks. Something was weighing on him, Lila. I don't think this was easy for him." The words didn't bring comfort. They brought more questions. What could have been so heavy that he couldn't share it with her? Lila's mind kept circling back to the smudge on the letter. She pulled it out again, this time examining it under the warm glow of her desk lamp. That's when she noticed something else. On the back, faint indentations, as if he had written something and erased it. Her heart pounded as she reached for a pencil, shading lightly to reveal what had been hidden. Lila's hands shook as she shaded over the faint indentations. Slowly words began to form, uneven and jagged, as though he had written them in a rush and then thought better of it. Her breath caught in her throat as she made out the phrase, "I'm sorry for what I couldn't say." The sentence lingered in her mind, echoing like a cryptic riddle. What couldn't he say? And why? She grabbed her phone again, her thoughts spiraling. Something about this wasn't right. She dialed Sarah's number, this time with more urgency. "Sarah, please," Lila begged. "If you know anything, anything at all, you have to tell me." Sarah hesitated before speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know everything, but I know he was scared, Lila. He said there were things he needed to fix, things he thought he couldn't share with you because he didn't want to hurt you." "What things?" Lila demanded. But Sarah's silence on the other end told her she wouldn't get an answer tonight. Restless, Lila decided to retrace her steps, searching for anything she might have overlooked. She went to the river where they'd last been together, hoping for a clue. The place was eerily quiet, the only sound the gentle rush of water. She closed her eyes, trying to recall their last conversation. He had been distracted, yes, but there was something else. He had said something strange that day, something she hadn't understood at the time. "I just want you to remember that I love you, no matter what," he had said, his voice heavy with something she couldn't name. Standing there now, that memory filled her with a new dread. It was as though he had been saying goodbye long before the letter arrived. As Lila stood by the river, replaying his words in her mind, something caught her eye in the soft dirt along the bank. It was faint but unmistakable. Footprints. They were spaced unevenly, as if someone had been pacing back and forth. Her pulse quickened. These weren't old. They were fresh, still sharp in the damp ground from yesterday's rain. She followed them, her heart pounding louder with each step. The trail led her closer to the water, where she noticed something partially buried in the mud. Kneeling, she carefully pulled it out, a small notebook, its cover smeared but intact. She wiped it clean with her sleeve, her fingers trembling as she opened it. The first page made her breath hitch. It was his handwriting, the same deliberate style as the letter. But these words were different. The first entry read, "If anything happens to me, I need someone to know the truth." Her hands tightened around the notebook, her chest tightening. The truth? What truth? She flipped through the pages, scanning fragments of his thoughts, hurried and disjointed. Mentions of debts, cryptic references to keeping her safe, and a name she didn't recognize. Evan. Lila's mind raced. He had kept this hidden, not just from her, but from everyone. And now she wasn't sure if his disappearance was truly his choice, or if someone had forced it on him. She glanced around nervously, a chill creeping up her spine as the pieces of the puzzle twisted into something darker. Lila's heart raced as she flipped through the notebook, desperate to make sense of the fragments of his life that felt like they were slipping through her fingers. She came across another entry, written hastily, as if he had been trying to get something off his chest before it was too late. "Evan knows. He's the one who's been pressuring me. If I don't do this, I'll lose everything. And Lila, she's better off without me." A cold wave washed over her. Evan, the name that had appeared more than once in his scattered thoughts. She couldn't make sense of it. Why would someone named Evan be involved in his decision to leave her? It felt like a betrayal, but there was something more to it, something she hadn't considered until now. She raced back to her apartment, the notebook clutched tightly in her hands. Her mind raced with 1,000 possibilities, but none of them prepared her for what she would find when she reached her door. The apartment was eerily quiet, but something was off. The door was slightly ajar, as if someone had been there. Hesitantly, she pushed it open, only to be met by a shocking sight. There, sitting on her couch, was Evan, her ex's best friend. Before she could react, Evan looked up, his face twisted with guilt and sorrow. "I didn't want you to find out this way," he said, his voice shaky. "But he didn't leave you because he didn't love you. He left because he was in danger. I'm the one who asked him to disappear." Lila's stomach dropped. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "What do you mean? What danger?" Evan stood up slowly, his eyes filled with regret. "The truth is, your boyfriend was involved in something he couldn't get out of. And he paused, swallowing hard. "I tried to protect him, but I was too late." Before Lila could fully process his words, Evan pulled out a phone, showing her an image of her ex, alive, but surrounded by men in dark suits. The chilling realization hit her. Her boyfriend hadn't just left. He had been forced to, and now his life was at risk. Lila stood frozen, her mind reeling. Evan's words echoed in her ears, but they didn't feel real. "He was involved in something?" she whispered, barely able to form the question. "What kind of danger?" Evan looked away, guilt and regret flooding his face. "It was bigger than we realized. Your boyfriend got caught up with the wrong people. Money, deals, things he couldn't escape from. They threatened him, threatened you too. That's why he left without a word. He thought if he disappeared, you'd be safe." Lila's chest tightened. All this time she had believed she had lost him because of something she had done. But it wasn't her fault at all. He had been trying to protect her, to shield her from a dangerous world he had never let her see. "Where is he now?" Lila asked, the question almost a plea. Evan hesitated. "I don't know where he is, but I know they're after him. The people who pulled him into this, they won't let him go so easily. That's why I told him to stay away from you, Lila. I was trying to buy us time." Lila's eyes blurred with tears. The man she loved hadn't left her because he didn't care. He had left to save her. It was a bitter realization, one that hit her like a tidal wave. As the days passed, Lila kept the notebook close, hoping one day she would hear from him again. But deep down, she knew the truth. Love wasn't always enough to keep two people together. Sometimes the greatest act of love was letting go, whether they came back or not. The river where their journey began now felt like a place of quiet reflection, a reminder of everything lost and everything that could still be found.